Well, hello and welcome to another video by Financial Learning. On today's video, we're going to be talking about a purchase agreement, a membership interest purchase agreement between Celsius Holdings and Alani Nutrition, also called Alani Nu. That's right, that is another energy drink company. Celsius has an purchase order, a contract out to buy them out from their current holder, as well as some of the other investors. We're going to go over the details of that purchase agreement, talk about the pricing, talk about some of the shares, talk about the lockup agreement of those shares. So that's right, if you are a current investor in Celsius, you're not going to want to miss it. You'll get a good idea about when the impact of this purchase will take place and how that will impact the overall amount of outstanding shares for the public. So without further ado, let's get right into it. All right, jumping into the 8K, we're going to go over a little bit more about this purchase agreement between Celsius and Alani Nutrition, also called Alani Nu. So getting into this was dated on February 20th, 2025, and it starts with entry into a material definitive agreement. Celsius Holdings, a Nevada corporation, entered into a membership interest purchase agreement by and among Celsius, Alani Nutrition LLC, again, Alani Nu, a Kentucky limited liability company, and then they list a couple of these other investor names, and then they mention Congo Brands Holding Company, a Delaware limited liability company. So again, Alani Nu may have had some form of their ownership by Congo Brands Holding Company. So now Congo Brands is going to be part of this transaction along with some of these other investor names. So pursuant to the purchase agreement on the terms and subject to the conditions therein, Celsius has agreed to purchase from the sellers all of the issued and outstanding membership interest in Alani Nu in exchange for $1.275 billion in cash, subject to adjustments as set forth in the purchase agreement, and an aggregate of 22,451,224 shares. We're going to talk about when those shares can actually be transacted in just a little bit. If you're an investor, sit tight. We're going to get to that point. And the last section is up to $25 million in additional cash consideration payable only if net sales of Alani Nu's products meet or exceed the target for 2025 as set forth in the purchase agreement. And then they talk a little bit more about the based on the volume weighted average price of Celsius's common stock. Speaking of that 22 million for this last 10 trading day period, and this period ended, this 10-day calculation ended on February 18th. Since the stock consideration has a value of $500 million, and it's considered part of this transaction, and that brings it up to a total of $1.775 billion. And then, of course, we have the $25 million that's also in play from a hitting that target perspective. And that gets it all the way up to $1.8 billion. So this potentially is a $1.8 billion deal. Again, it has not fully been inked yet. They'll talk about the closing considerations and a few other things, but let's continue on. Conditions to closing. It talks about it's expected to occur in the second quarter of 2025. There are some specific things to consider and different activities that must be done prior to closing. We're not going to go through that full list. Has a little bit to do with like some antitrust laws and things of that nature. But again, if you want to read through the full purchase agreement, there is a separate exhibit. It's linked to this 8K. I will put it in the description of the video. But jumping down a little bit further, they go through representations, warranties, and covenants, again, between these different groups, and it has to do with them having their best efforts and obligations pertaining to certain businesses following the closing. So again, each of these different members, whether they are the buyer or the seller, they all have an obligation to one another to conduct business appropriately, following this closing deal. And then they go through a couple of the other portions of this purchase agreement, some termination rights. So if this doesn't get fully signed within a certain period and they go over that period, it is within 9 months following the purchase agreement. And then there is 2 automatic 3-month extensions, so depending on how long it takes to go through all this antitrust verification, different laws and things of that nature. If it takes longer, there is a little bit of an extension here, but for whatever reason, if this does not go through and it falls through, Celsius will be required to pay Alani Nu $53.25 million as a termination fee, and that's in cash. So one other thing, again, I mentioned if you're an investor and you're concerned about the shares, that $500 million value, which we all know is worth much more after the price action after hours, there's a lockup and a registration rights agreement. So let's quickly go through that. It says, under the purchase agreement, Holdco will be subject to lockup with respect to the stock consideration, pursuant to which, subject to certain exceptions, Holdco may not sell or otherwise transfer the shares comprising the stock consideration, with 33% of the shares released from the lockup on the 12-month anniversary of the closing. So again, for 12 months, none of the 22 million and change shares, none of that $500 million worth of shares can be sold back into the market. And then only a third of those shares are privy to be sold back into the market after the 12-month period. And then another third is available to be sold after 18-month period. And then the final third can be sold after the 24-month period of closing. So again, there is a delayed form of dilution. All of these shares are being held as restricted shares at the moment. Again, they're locked up. This is not going to be impacting the share price. So if you are a current investor in Celsius Holdings, there is at least a 1-year period prior to any of these shares being sold back into the market. And then Alani Nu is going to be part of Celsius moving forward in terms of that additional revenue, additional profit margin, additional sales to the consumer. So again, within a year, we're going to have quite a few more quarterly earnings just to see exactly how big of an impact this specific purchase is going to be for Celsius shareholders. Also, they just confirm that some of these other entities in this sales agreement, such as MC and TS, they are all going to have what you call a piggyback registration rights relating to the stock consideration. So my understanding is that they will all be subject to this same lockup portion. Again, if I am saying that incorrectly, please correct me in the comments. And then let's jump down a little bit further. This is part of the announcement. So it says that on February 20th, Celsius issued an earnings release announcing its financial results for the fourth quarter. We're going to go through those results in another video, but I will be putting that out. So look forward. You may see it on the end screen here. I'll definitely have it on the channel very, very quickly. And then looking down a little bit further, it goes through some of the other disclosures. And then, as I mentioned at the very bottom of here, these are the links. So I'm going to put a link to the 8K in this video, but I'll also go ahead and drop a link for each of these other hyperlinks as well. I'm going to be covering the next press release, which actually goes into Alani Nu's revenue, some of the profit margins and things of that nature with respect to their balance sheet. Because again, Alani Nu, if you look them up, they're not a publicly held company. So this is a great opportunity to get a sneak peek into the balance sheet. So if you are a Celsius investor, you're going to get a little bit of an idea about what they're bringing to the table. All right, and that about wraps up for me, folks. I hope you enjoyed this quick update on the membership interest purchase agreement between Celsius Holdings and Alani Nu. We're going to go over the financial statements in just a little bit. Be on the lookout for that video. I'll drop it on the end screen at the end of this one. But if you enjoyed this video, consider giving it a like. Subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. Turn on those notifications so that you get the most up-to-date details as I release them. And again, please drop a comment. Let me know your thoughts about this purchase agreement. Do you think this was a bullish move on Celsius? What do you think about the financial results? I'm going to cover them myself, but I'd love to hear some feedback from you all. And with that said, hope you guys have a great rest of the day, and I'll see you on the next one.